The rain hammered against the windows of the small downtown diner as Emma sat hunched over her lukewarm coffee, staring at the stack of bills scattered across the worn table. Medical bills, mostly. Her mother's cancer treatment had drained every penny she had, maxed out 3 credit cards, and left her drowning in a sea of debt that seemed to have no shore in sight. She was 28 years old and felt like her life was already over before it had truly begun. The waitress, an older woman named Diane, who had seen Emma grow from a hopeful college student to this exhausted shell of a person, refilled her cup without asking. Emma managed a weak smile of gratitude, but said nothing. What was there to say? That she had just been evicted from her apartment? That her car had been repossessed last week? That she had been sleeping on her friend Sarah's couch for the past 10 days and could feel the friendship straining under the weight of her presence? Her phone buzzed. Another creditor. She let it go to voicemail. They could add it to the collection of 47 unheard messages already waiting there like little bombs she refused to defuse. Emma closed her eyes and tried to remember what hope felt like. It had been so long that the memory itself seemed like something she had read about rather than experienced. That was when the man in the expensive suit sat down across from her. Emma's eyes snapped open. He was older, maybe 50, with silver hair perfectly styled and eyes that assessed her with the cold precision of someone used to evaluating assets. His suit probably cost more than she used to make in 3 months. He set a leather briefcase on the table with a soft thud that somehow commanded attention despite the gentleness of the gesture. "I'm sorry, but I think you have the wrong person," Emma said, her voice rough from crying earlier that morning. She started to gather her bills, embarrassed by her poverty being so visible to this stranger. "Emma Richardson," the man said. It wasn't a question. 28 years old. Formerly employed as a graphic designer at Morrison & Associates until the company downsized 6 months ago. Currently unemployed. Caring for your mother who is undergoing stage 3 breast cancer treatment at Metropolitan General Hospital. You have approximately $147,000 in medical debt plus another $32,000 in various credit card balances and personal loans. Emma's blood ran cold. "Who are you? How do you know all that?" The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "My name is Robert Chen. I'm an attorney. I represent someone who has a proposition for you. A proposition that could eliminate all your debt and provide you with substantial additional compensation." Emma should have stood up and walked away. Every instinct screamed that this was dangerous, that nothing good could come from a stranger who investigated her life in such detail. But desperation is a powerful silencer of instincts. She stayed seated. "What kind of proposition?" Robert opened his briefcase and extracted a folder, placing it carefully on top of her pile of bills. "My client is a very wealthy man who finds himself in need of a wife, temporarily. He requires someone to pose as his wife for a period of 6 months. In exchange, he is willing to pay all your debts immediately and provide you with an additional $500,000 upon successful completion of the arrangement." Emma laughed. It came out harsh and bitter. "This is insane. This is some kind of scam or human trafficking or something?" She started to stand up. Robert didn't move, didn't flinch. "Miss Richardson, I understand your skepticism, but I assure you this is completely legitimate and legal. My client is willing to have any contract reviewed by an attorney of your choosing. All transactions will be handled through my law firm, which has been serving New York's elite families for over 70 years. You may research us. Everything will be documented, legal, and above board." "Why would anyone need a fake wife?" Emma asked, still standing but no longer moving toward the door. "My client is involved in a complex international business negotiation. The parties involved are from a culture that places enormous value on family and marriage. They refuse to do business with unmarried men, seeing them as unstable and untrustworthy. My client's previous engagement ended badly and very publicly 3 months ago. He needs to present himself as a married man to close this deal, which is worth approximately $3 billion to his company. Your compensation, while generous, is a rounding error in that context." Emma slowly sat back down. $3 billion. The number was so large it didn't even feel real. And this man was offering to solve all her problems for 6 months of pretending? It seemed too good to be true, which usually meant it was. "What would I have to do?" she asked quietly. Robert slipped the folder across to her. "You would live in my client's home, attend social functions with him as his wife, and maintain the appearance of a genuine marriage in public and in front of his business associates. There would be a prenuptial agreement, naturally, and a postnuptial agreement as well. The marriage would be legally binding during the 6-month period and would be quietly annulled at its conclusion. You would be required to sign comprehensive non-disclosure agreements." "And in private?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What would be expected of me in private?" Robert met her eyes steadily. "You would have separate bedrooms. My client has no interest in a physical relationship. This is strictly a business arrangement. The contract is very clear on that point. Any violation of those terms by either party would result in immediate termination of the agreement and legal consequences." Emma opened the folder. The first page showed a bank statement with an amount that made her head swim. The second page was a list of her debts, with check marks next to each one and the words "paid in full" and the day's date. She looked up sharply. "You've already paid them?" Robert nodded. "My client authorized me to handle your debts immediately as a gesture of good faith. Whether you accept the arrangement or not, those debts are cleared. If you decline, the payment is considered a gift with no strings attached. If you accept, it will be credited as the first part of your compensation." Emma's hands began to shake. He had just wiped out years of crushing debt without even meeting her, without knowing if she would say yes. Who did things like that? She thought of her mother in that hospital bed, how tired she looked, how the worry about money added to her pain. She thought about the impossibility of starting over with nothing at age 28 in a city that ate people alive. "I want to meet him," Emma said. "Before I agree to anything, I want to meet your client." Robert smiled, and this time it seemed genuine. "He said you would say that. He's waiting outside in the car." Emma's heart hammered as she followed Robert out of the diner into the rain. A black car that looked like it belonged to royalty idled at the curb, its windows tinted so dark she couldn't see inside. Robert opened the rear door and gestured for her to enter. She slid into leather seats softer than any bed she had ever slept in. The interior smelled of expensive cologne and new car scent. And sitting across from her, studying her with intense dark eyes, was the most devastatingly handsome man she had ever seen. He was younger than she expected, maybe 35, with dark hair that fell rakishly across his forehead and a jawline that looked carved from marble. He wore a charcoal suit that fit him perfectly, and when he shifted slightly, she caught a glimpse of what might have been tattoos beneath his crisp white shirt. He didn't look like any billionaire businessman she had ever imagined. "Miss Richardson," he said, and his voice was deep and smooth like aged whiskey. "I'm Alexander Holt. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me." Emma found her voice. "You paid my debts without even knowing if I'd say yes? Why?" Alexander tilted his head slightly. "Because whether you agree to my proposal or not, you didn't deserve to suffer for taking care of someone you love. I did my research, Miss Richardson. I know you gave up a promising career, drained your savings, and destroyed your credit to care for your mother. That's admirable. It deserves to be rewarded, not punished." "It could also be seen as manipulative," Emma said, surprising herself with her boldness. "Paying the debts makes it harder for me to say no." Alexander smiled, and it transformed his face from merely handsome to absolutely breathtaking. "I prefer to think of it as demonstrating my serious intentions. But you're right, it is manipulative. I won't insult your intelligence by pretending otherwise. I need something from you, and I'm willing to pay handsomely for it. But I want you to enter into this arrangement with clear eyes and full understanding." "Why me?" Emma asked. "You could have anyone. You could hire an actress, someone used to playing roles." "I need someone real," Alexander said. "Someone who hasn't spent their life performing. The people I'm negotiating with are extraordinarily perceptive. They can spot fakery a mile away. I need someone genuine, someone who reacts authentically, someone who isn't calculating every word and gesture." Robert ran a psychological profile. "You have the qualities I need." "Which are?" Emma asked. "Honesty, loyalty, intelligence, and desperation enough to actually consider this insane offer," Alexander said bluntly. "I won't lie to you, Emma. May I call you Emma?" She nodded. "I won't lie to you, Emma. I chose you because you need this badly enough, but not because you're the type of person who would try to exploit the situation for more than we require."
Agreed upon. Everything about your history suggests you're someone who keeps your word and honors your commitments even when it costs you dearly. Emma felt exposed, as if this stranger could see straight through her skin to the frightened, exhausted woman barely holding herself together underneath. "How long do I have to decide?" 24 hours, Alexander said. "I need an answer by this time tomorrow. The contract is in the folder Robert gave you. Have a lawyer review it if you wish. I'll cover their fees. My assistant will provide you with a phone and a hotel room for the night so you have space to think clearly." "And if I say no?" "Then you say no," Alexander said, simply. "The paid debts remain paid. You walk away owing me nothing." Emma looked at him for a long moment. "What's really going on here, Mr. Holt? There has to be more to this story than you're telling me." Something flickered in Alexander's eyes, something that might have been respect. "There's always more to the story, Emma, but I've told you everything you need to know to make an informed decision. The rest is my business, and if you agree to this arrangement, you'll learn it in time." The hotel room was nicer than anywhere Emma had ever stayed. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city lights, and the bed was enormous and covered in pillows that probably cost more than her previous month's rent. She spread the contract out on the desk and read it 3 times, then called Sarah. "You're telling me some billionaire wants you to be his fake wife for 6 months, and he's already paid off all your debt?" Sarah's voice was skeptical and concerned. "Emma, this sounds dangerous. This sounds like how horror movies start." "I know," Emma said, looking out at the glittering city. "But Sarah, he paid $147,000 without blinking. He put me in a hotel that costs at least $800 a night. The contract has been reviewed by one of the most prestigious law firms in New York." "What does your gut tell you?" Sarah asked. Emma closed her eyes. "My gut tells me Alexander Holt is a man with secrets, but my gut also tells me he's not going to hurt me. And Sarah, I can't go back to where I was. I can't watch my mom worry about money while she's trying not to die. I can't keep crashing on your couch and pretending I'm not a burden. This is a way out." "Then you've already decided," Sarah said softly. "I think I have," Emma admitted. She called the number Robert had given her at exactly 24 hours after their meeting. Alexander answered on the first ring. "I'll do it," Emma said. "I'll be your wife for 6 months." The wedding was simple and felt surreal. A courthouse ceremony with Robert and Alexander's assistant, a woman named Patricia, as witnesses. Emma wore a dress that Patricia had purchased for her, simple but elegant and probably worth more than Emma's entire previous wardrobe combined. Alexander slid a ring onto her finger that felt heavy with its weight of deception. The judge pronounced them husband and wife, and Alexander kissed her cheek with lips that barely touched her skin. "Mrs. Holt," he said with a slight smile, "welcome to your new life." Alexander's home was not a home. It was an architectural masterpiece, perched in the hills overlooking the city, all glass and steel, and spaces so open they made Emma feel tiny. Her bedroom was larger than the apartment she had shared with her mother, with an attached bathroom that featured a bathtub she could swim in. Patricia gave her a tour, explaining the house rules in a brisk, efficient manner. Mr. Holt rises at 5:30. He works out in the home gym from 6 to 7. Breakfast is at 7:15 in the main dining room. You'll be expected to join him. He leaves for the office at 8. Your presence is not required during work hours unless there's a social function. Dinner is at 7 in the evening when he's home, which is most nights. Weekends may involve social obligations. Patricia will coordinate your schedule. Emma nodded, trying to absorb it all. What should I do during the day? Patricia's expression softened slightly. Whatever you like, Mrs. Holt. Mr. Holt has set up accounts for you for personal expenses. You're welcome to explore the city, pursue hobbies, visit your mother as often as you wish. A car and driver are at your disposal. That first night, Emma lay in her enormous bed, staring at the ceiling and wondering what she had done. She was married to a stranger, living in a house that felt like a museum, wearing clothes that cost more than she used to make in a month. It all felt like a dream, or perhaps a very elaborate trap that she wouldn't recognize until it was too late. Breakfast the next morning was awkward. Alexander sat at one end of the long table, reading something on his tablet while eating perfectly prepared eggs and fruit. Emma sat at the other end, unsure what to do or say. The silence stretched between them like an ocean.
Finally, Alexander looked up. "You don't have to sit so far away. I don't bite." Emma moved a few seats closer. "This is all very strange," she said. "It is," Alexander agreed. "But it was become normal faster than you think. Humans are remarkably adaptable." "Can I ask you something?" Emma said. "You can ask. I may not answer." "Why did your previous engagement end?" Emma asked, "if that's not too personal." Alexander set down his fork and studied her. "It's not too personal, given that you're now my wife. My fiancée, Victoria, left me because she discovered I wasn't the man she thought I was. She wanted the billionaire, the parties, the status. She didn't want the reality of who I actually am." "Which is?" Emma asked quietly. "Complicated," Alexander said. "Damaged. Someone who has made choices that can't be unmade. Victoria wanted a fairy tale. I can't provide that." "But you can provide a fake marriage," Emma said. Alexander smiled without humor. "Apparently, I excel at those." Over the following weeks, Emma's life took on a strange new rhythm. She visited her mother every afternoon, and the relief on her mother's face when Emma told her the debts were paid made everything worth it. She had explained it as an unexpected settlement from a lawsuit, and her mother, too tired and sick to question good fortune, had simply cried and held Emma's hand. The social functions began. Charity galas, business dinners, cocktail parties filled with people who had more money than Emma could fathom. Alexander was always attentive in public, his hand on her lower back, pulling out her chair, laughing at her nervous jokes. To the outside world, they looked like a couple deeply in love. In private, they were polite strangers. But Emma began to notice things. The way Alexander's jaw tightened when certain business associates spoke. The way he disappeared into his study some nights and didn't emerge until dawn. The phone calls he took in languages she didn't recognize. The shadows that crossed his face when he thought no one was watching. She also noticed his kindness. How he asked about her mother every day. How he had quietly arranged for the best oncologist in the country to review her mother's case. How he left books he thought Emma might like on the table beside her favorite chair. How he remembered that she didn't like coffee after 6 in the evening. One night, about 6 weeks into their arrangement, Emma couldn't sleep. She wandered down to the kitchen for water and found Alexander sitting in the dark at the kitchen island, a glass of whiskey in his hand. "Can't sleep either?" she asked. He looked up, and in the dim light from the city below, he looked younger and infinitely tired. "Old ghosts," he said. "They're particularly loud tonight." Emma poured herself water and, on impulse, sat beside him instead of maintaining their usual careful distance. "Want to talk about them?" Alexander looked at her for a long moment. "Why would you care? This is just a business arrangement for you." Emma surprised herself by saying, "Maybe at first, but I've been living in your home for 6 weeks, eating meals with you, attending parties on your arm. You stop being just a business arrangement after a while. You become a person." "A damaged person," Alexander reminded her. "We're all damaged," Emma said. "Some of us just hide it better than others." Alexander turned his glass in his hands. "My father built this company from nothing. He was ruthless, brilliant, and cruel. He taught me that the world respects only power and that showing weakness was suicide. When I was 22, I made a choice that destroyed someone I cared about to protect the company. I told myself it was necessary, that I was being smart and strategic like my father taught me. But it was just cowardice, dressed up as pragmatism." Emma waited, sensing there was more. Victoria found out about it. She looked at me differently after that, like I was something monstrous. And maybe I am. "Maybe this fake marriage is all I deserve," Alexander said quietly. "Something that looks real from the outside, but has nothing genuine inside." Emma reached out and placed her hand over his. "For what it's worth, I don't think you're a monster. I think you're someone who made a mistake and has been punishing yourself for it ever since." Alexander looked at their joined hands. "You barely know me. I know you paid the debts of a complete stranger without expecting anything in return. I know you visit the children's wing at the hospital every Tuesday under a false name so no one knows it's you. Patricia told me. I know you funded a scholarship program for kids from the neighborhood you grew up in. I know that you're not the monster you think you are." Alexander's eyes met hers, and something shifted in the air between them. Emma felt her breath catch. This was dangerous territory. This was not part of their arrangement. Alexander pulled his hand away gently. "You should get some sleep. We have the Morrison dinner tomorrow night." Emma nodded and stood up, feeling the moment slip away. "Good night, Alexander." "Good night, Emma." But something had changed. They both felt it. The Morrison dinner was at an estate that made Alexander's house look modest. James Morrison was one of Alexander's primary business partners, an older man with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue. His wife, Diane, reminded Emma of her grandmother, warm and watchful in equal measure. Over dessert, Diane leaned toward Emma. "How did you two meet? Everyone has been so curious. Alexander never spoke about you before the wedding announcement." Emma had prepared for this question. They had a cover story, carefully constructed and rehearsed. "We met at a gallery opening. I spilled wine on his very expensive shoes." Alexander picked up the story smoothly. "I was going to be angry, but then I looked up and saw the most beautiful woman I'd ever met apologizing so sincerely, I couldn't help but forgive her." "And then what?" Diane pressed, clearly delighted. Emma smiled and found herself embellishing the story, adding details they hadn't discussed. "Then he asked me to dinner to make up for the shoes. I said yes, mostly because I felt guilty. But by the end of that dinner, I realized he was nothing like I expected. He was funny and kind and talked about art like it mattered, not like most rich men who just buy paintings as investments." Alexander's eyes met hers across the table, and she saw surprise there and genuine warmth. "I knew that night I was going to marry her," Alexander said softly, and Emma felt her heart skip. The intensity in his gaze made the words feel real, made everything feel real. "How romantic," Diane sighed. "In this cynical world, it's lovely to see genuine love." Emma felt guilt twist in her stomach. They were lying to this kind woman, spinning a fairy tale where there was only a business transaction. But when she looked at Alexander, she saw something in his eyes that didn't look like acting. The drive home was quiet. Emma stared out the window, confused by the emotions swirling inside her. She had felt something during dinner, something real and warm and terrifying. "You were good tonight," Alexander said finally. "The way you elaborated on our story, that was quick thinking." "It felt wrong," Emma admitted, "lying to people who were genuinely happy for us." "Welcome to my world," Alexander said, but there was no bitterness in his voice, just sadness. "Everything is performance. Everything is strategy. Sometimes I forget what's real anymore." Emma turned to look at him. "What we said tonight about how we supposedly met, if it had been real, would you have actually asked me to dinner?" Alexander pulled into the garage and turned off the car. He sat still for a moment before answering. "If I had met you in another life, in another context, where I wasn't this person I've become, yes,
I would have asked you to dinner, and I would have tried very hard to make you say yes. Why? Emma asked softly. Because you see me, Alexander said, turning to face her. Not the money, not the company, not the persona I present to the world. You see me, and you don't look away in disgust. That's rarer than you know. The space between them in the car felt charged with possibility and danger. Emma knew she should get out, should maintain the boundaries they had established, but she couldn't make herself move. Alexander reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "This isn't part of our arrangement," he whispered. "I know," Emma breathed. "If we cross this line, everything becomes complicated. I know." "Emma," Alexander's voice was raw with something that might have been longing. "I can't offer you anything real. This ends in 4.5 months. You'll walk away with your money, and I'll go back to being alone. That's how this has to end." "Then we don't cross the line," Emma said, even as every fiber of her being wanted to lean into his touch. "We stick to the arrangement." Alexander withdrew his hand, and the loss of contact felt physical. "You're right. We stick to the arrangement." They went to their separate bedrooms, but Emma lay awake until dawn, her skin still tingling where he had touched her face. The next morning, Alexander was already gone when Emma came down for breakfast. Patricia informed her that he had flown to Tokyo for urgent business and would be gone for a week. Emma told herself she wasn't disappointed, that the distance was good, that they both needed space to reset and remember what this relationship actually was. She threw herself into visiting her mother, whose treatments were showing promising results. The new oncologist Alexander had arranged was optimistic, and her mother's color looked better than it had in months. "How's married life?" her mother asked during one visit. Emma forced a smile. "It's an adjustment." Her mother studied her with the perception only mothers have. "You're falling for
Him. Mom, no, it's not like that, Emma protested. Emma Louise, I've known you your entire life. I can see it in your eyes when you talk about him. Be careful, sweetheart. Rich men like that live in different worlds than us." Emma wanted to argue, to explain that it wasn't real, that it was just an arrangement. But the words stuck in her throat, because her mother was right. She was falling for Alexander Holt, and it was the most foolish thing she could possibly do. Alexander returned from Tokyo looking exhausted and carrying a gift. He found Emma curled up in the library, reading, and sat down across from her without preamble. "I bought you something," he said, handing her a beautifully wrapped box. Inside was a first edition of her favorite book, one she had mentioned in passing weeks ago. Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Alexander, this is too much." "It's nothing," he said. "I saw it in a bookshop in Tokyo and thought of you." "You were thinking of me in Tokyo?" "I was thinking of you the entire time I was in Tokyo," Alexander admitted. "I took business calls and sat through meetings, and all I could think about was how much easier it was to breathe when you were in the same city. That's a problem, Emma." "Why is it a problem?" Emma asked, setting the book aside. "Why does this have to be so complicated? Why can't we just acknowledge that something is happening between us?" "Because I ruin things," Alexander said with painful honesty. "I ruin everything I touch. My father's legacy was poison, and I drank it willingly. I've hurt people, Emma. I've made choices that I can't take back. You deserve someone whole, someone good, not someone who has to pay people to pretend to love him." "I'm not pretending anymore," Emma said, the words escaping before she could stop them. "I haven't been pretending for weeks, and I think you haven't either." Alexander closed his eyes. "Emma, don't." "Don't what? Don't tell you the truth? Don't acknowledge that when you touch me, even casually, I feel it for hours afterward? Don't admit that I look forward to breakfast with you more than anything else in my day?" "This ends in 4 months," Alexander said desperately. 4 months, and then you leave. That was the deal." "Deals can change," Emma said. "Not this one." Alexander stood up abruptly. "I have the company to think about. I have the acquisition to complete. I need you to maintain this facade for 4 more months, and then you need to walk away.
That's what's best for everyone. What if I don't want to walk away? Emma asked, standing to face him. You don't mean that. You're grateful because I helped your mother. You're caught up in the luxury and the romance of the situation. But this isn't real life, Emma. Real life is messy and complicated, and I would only make you miserable. You don't get to decide what I feel, Emma said, her voice rising. You don't get to tell me that my emotions aren't real just because they're inconvenient for you. I'm trying to protect you, Alexander said. From what? From possibly being happy? From taking a chance on something real for once in your carefully controlled life? From me, Alexander shouted, and the raw pain in his voice stopped Emma cold. I'm trying to protect you from me, Emma, because everyone I've ever cared about, I've destroyed. My mother left because she couldn't stand what my father was turning me into. Victoria ran when she saw the truth. Even my business partners trust me only as far as the contracts compel them to. I will hurt you, Emma. It's what I do. It's all I know how to do. Emma stepped closer to him. Then hurt me. I'd rather feel something real, even pain, than continue this half-life we're living where we pretend we don't care about each other. You don't know what you're asking. Then show me, Emma challenged. Tell me the whole truth. Tell me what you did that you think makes you such a monster. Alexander looked at her for a long moment, and then, finally, he began to talk. He told her about Marcus, his best friend from college, who had invested his family's savings in one of Alexander's early ventures. He told her about how the company was struggling, how his father pressured him to make cuts, to prioritize profit over people. He told her about how he had restructured the company in a way that left Marcus's investment worthless while protecting the larger stakeholders. Marcus lost everything, Alexander said, his voice hollow. His family's home, his sister's college fund, everything. He came to me, begged me to help, to find another way, and I told him it was just business. I hid behind spreadsheets and market forces and convinced myself I had no choice. But I did have a choice, Emma. I chose the company over my friend. I chose money over loyalty. What happened to Marcus? Emma asked gently. He moved away. Last I heard, he's working 2 jobs to support his family and put his sister through community college. He won't take my calls. He told me once, through his lawyer, when I
tried to give him money, that he didn't want anything from me, that I had shown him who I really was, and he wanted nothing to do with that person. Have you tried to apologize? Emma asked. How do you apologize for something like that? How do you take back a betrayal that destroyed someone's life? You start by admitting you were wrong. You start by trying to make it right, not by punishing yourself forever, Emma said. It's too late for that, Alexander said. It's only too late if you decide it is, Emma replied. You can't change what you did, Alexander, but you can change who you are now. You can choose differently. Alexander looked at her with something like wonder. How are you not running away from me right now? Because I'm starting to understand something, Emma said. You're not a monster. You're just a man who made a terrible mistake and has been too afraid to forgive himself. And maybe I'm not supposed to be your fake wife. Maybe I'm supposed to be the person who helps you find your way back. Emma. Alexander breathed her name like a prayer. She closed the distance between them and took his face in her hands. I see you, Alexander Holt. All of you. The mistakes and the regrets and the fear. And I'm still here. He kissed her then, and it felt like falling and flying at the same time. His hands tangled in her hair, and she pressed closer, wanting to erase every bit of space between them. The kiss was desperate and tender and filled with all the words they had been holding back. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Alexander rested his forehead against hers. This changes everything, he whispered. Good, Emma said. I want everything changed. They made love that night, and it was nothing like the business arrangement they had started with. It was real and raw and perfect in its imperfection.
Afterward, lying tangled together in Alexander's bed, Emma traced patterns on his chest. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now, I try to be the man you seem to think I am," Alexander said. "And I start by making things right with Marcus. How? I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out. With your help, if you'll give it. Always," Emma promised. The next 3 months were both the happiest and most complicated of Emma's life. She and Alexander stopped pretending, stopped maintaining separate lives. They were truly together, truly married in all the ways that mattered. But the clock was still ticking. The 6-month arrangement was approaching its end, and neither of them had addressed what that meant. Alexander located Marcus and invited him to dinner. Marcus refused at first, but Alexander persisted, and finally Marcus agreed to meet. Emma insisted on going with him for support. Marcus was a tired-looking man in his mid-30s with wary eyes. He sat across from Alexander in a quiet restaurant booth, arms crossed defensively. "I don't want your money," Marcus said before Alexander could speak. "I already told you that." "I know," Alexander said. "I'm not here to offer you money. I'm here to apologize." Marcus laughed bitterly. 10 years too late for that, don't you think?" "Yes," Alexander agreed. "It is too late. I can't take back what I did. I can't restore what you lost. But I can admit that I was wrong, that I prioritized profit over friendship, strategy over loyalty. I can tell you that not a day has gone by that I haven't regretted it. And I can ask, not for forgiveness, but for the chance to try to make amends." "How?" Marcus asked. "How do you make amends for destroying everything?" Alexander pulled out a folder. "This is Marcus Industries. It's a shell company I created in your name. In this folder are the shares, the operating agreements, and the bank accounts. It's worth approximately $5 million as of today. It's yours. No strings, no contracts, no obligations to me whatsoever." Marcus stared at the folder like it might explode. "I told you I don't want your charity." "It's not charity," Alexander said. "It's what I should have given you 10 years ago. It's what you would have had if I had been a better man, a better friend. I'm not asking you to forgive me, Marcus. I'm not even asking you to acknowledge this. But please, for the sake of your family, for your sister, who deserves to go to the college she dreamed of, take it." Marcus's hands shook as he opened the folder. Tears ran down his face. "Why now? Why after all this time?" "Because I met someone who made me want to be better," Alexander said, glancing at Emma. "Someone who made me believe it's never too late to try to make things right." Marcus looked at Emma, really looked at her for the first time. "You married him?" "I did," Emma said. "And he's not the same man who hurt you. Or maybe he is, but he's also more than that mistake. People are complicated, Marcus. We all make terrible choices. What matters is what we do after." Marcus closed the folder. "I need time to think about this." "Take all the time you need," Alexander said. "The offer stands."
As they left the restaurant, Alexander took Emma's hand. "Thank you for making me do that." "I didn't make you do anything. You chose to," Emma said. "With your help," Alexander corrected. "Always with your help." 2 weeks later, Marcus called. He had accepted the company and the funds. He didn't forgive Alexander, not yet, but he thanked him. It was a start. The 6-month mark arrived on a Tuesday. Emma woke up in Alexander's arms, knowing that according to their contract, this was supposed to be the end. Today, they were supposed to file for annulment. Today, she was supposed to collect her final payment and walk away. Neither of them mentioned it at breakfast. Finally, as the day drew toward evening, Emma couldn't take it anymore. "Are we going to talk about it?" Alexander set down his coffee. "Talk about what?" "About how today is 6 months. About how our arrangement is officially over." Alexander stood and walked to the window, looking out over the city. "Is that what you want? To end this?" "You know it's not," Emma said. "But we had a deal." "Deals can change," Alexander said, echoing her words from months ago. "You said that to me once." Emma stood and joined him at the window. "So what are you saying?" Alexander turned to face her, taking both her hands in his.
I'm saying that I went into this arrangement thinking I could keep my distance, thinking I could maintain control. I thought I could pay you to play a role for 6 months, and then we'd both walk away unchanged. But Emma, you've changed everything. You've changed me. Alexander, Emma breathed, I don't want an annulment. I don't want you to leave. I want this marriage to be real in every sense of the word. I want to wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life. I want to grow old with you. I want to build something genuine that isn't based on contracts and arrangements, but on love. Emma felt tears streaming down her face. Are you sure? Because once we cross this line, there's no going back to the safety of calling it a business deal. This becomes real life, with all its mess and complications. I've never been more sure of anything, Alexander said. I love you, Emma. I think I started loving you the day you sat across from me in that car and called me manipulative to my face. You saw through all my defenses from the beginning, and instead of running away, you stayed. You helped me find my way back to being human. I love you too, Emma said. I think I knew that night in the kitchen when you told me about your ghosts. I loved you then, and I've been falling deeper every day since. He kissed her, and it felt like a promise, like the beginning of something real and lasting. When they broke apart, Alexander pulled something from his pocket. Another ring, different from the one he had given her at the courthouse. This one was vintage, delicate, with a sapphire surrounded by small diamonds. This was my grandmother's ring, Alexander said. She was the only person in my family who truly loved without conditions. She died when I was 15, but before she passed, she told me to give this ring to the woman who made me want to be better. I thought that person didn't exist, but then I met you. He slipped the ring onto her finger beside the one already there. Emma Richardson, will you marry me? For real this time, with no contracts, no time limits, no arrangements. Just you and me, building a life together. Yes, Emma said through her tears. Yes, absolutely yes. They had a small ceremony 3 months later. Emma's mother was there, healthy and in remission, crying happy tears. Sarah stood as maid of honor, no longer skeptical, but delighted. Marcus came, still not quite ready to call Alexander a friend again, but willing to witness this new beginning. Patricia dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, insisting it was allergies. Robert, the attorney who had started it all, officiated. As he pronounced them husband and wife for the second time, he smiled and said, I've presided over many marriages in my career, but I've never been happier to see two people find their way to each other. Alexander kissed his wife, his real wife, and whispered against her lips, Thank you for seeing past the monster I thought I was. Thank you for letting me, Emma whispered back. The reception was held at the house that no longer felt like a museum, but like a home. Emma had slowly added her touches over the months, making the cold spaces warm and lived in. Photos on the mantel, books scattered on tables, her mother's quilt draped over the couch. Signs of real life, real love. During their first dance, Alexander held Emma close and said, I need to tell you something. That sounds ominous, Emma teased. The business deal, the one I needed a wife for, Alexander said. It fell through about 4 months ago. Emma pulled back to look at him. What? But you never said anything. I know. The investors decided to go in a different direction. Something about market.
Conditions and risk assessment. Honestly, by that point, I didn't care. I realized somewhere along the way that I wasn't maintaining our arrangement for the business deal anymore. I was maintaining it because I was terrified that if I told you the truth, if I admitted I loved you, you would leave. You would think I was trying to trap you or manipulate you. Alexander, Emma said softly, you should have told me. I know, and I'm sorry. But Emma, I need you to understand something. That final payment you were supposed to receive, the $500,000, it's still yours. It's in an account in your name. Whether you want it or not, whether you think you earned it or not, it's yours. I don't want you to ever feel trapped or like you can't leave if you want to. I don't want to leave, Emma said firmly, and I don't want the money. Put it in the scholarship fund, the one for kids from your old neighborhood. Use it to help someone else the way you helped me." "Emma, that's too much money to just give away." "It's not giving away. It's paying forward," Emma said. "Besides, I don't need it. I have something much more valuable." "What's that?" Alexander asked, though he was smiling like he knew the answer. "You," Emma said simply. "I have you, and your love, and the chance to build a life that's real and messy and beautiful. That's worth more than any amount of money." "How did I get so lucky?" Alexander wondered aloud. "You took a chance on a desperate woman in a diner," Emma said. "You saw past her circumstances to who she really was. And then you let her see past your walls to who you really are. That's not luck, Alexander. That's choice. We chose each other." "Best choice I ever made," Alexander said, kissing her again as their guests applauded. 6 months after their real wedding, Emma discovered she was pregnant. She told Alexander over breakfast, sliding the positive test across the table toward him with shaking hands. His face transformed from confusion to shock to absolute joy in the space of seconds. "We're going to be parents?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. "We're going to be parents," Emma confirmed. Alexander came around the table and knelt beside her chair, placing his hands gently on her still flat stomach. "Hello in there," he said softly. "I don't know if you can hear me yet, but I want you to know something. I'm going to try my absolute hardest to be a good father to you. I'm going to make mistakes, probably lots of them, but I'm going to love you fiercely and protect you always. And you're going to have the most amazing mother in the world." Emma ran her fingers through his hair. "You're going to be a wonderful father. I know it." "How do you know?" Alexander asked, looking up at her with vulnerable eyes. "My own father was terrible. What if I turn out like him?" "Because you're not him," Emma said firmly. "You've spent years breaking free of his influence, making different choices, becoming a different man. Our child is going to know a father who admits his mistakes, who tries to make things right, who leads with compassion rather than cruelty. That's who you are now, Alexander." The baby came 8 months later, a girl they named Grace. She had Alexander's dark eyes and Emma's smile, and from the moment Alexander held her, Emma knew her fears had been unfounded. He was a natural father, patient and gentle and completely devoted. Late one night, Emma found him in the nursery, rocking Grace back to sleep. She leaned against the doorframe, watching this man who had once thought himself incapable of love, holding their daughter like she was the most precious thing in the world. "She's perfect," Alexander whispered, noticing Emma. "How did we make something so perfect?" Emma came to sit beside them. "I don't know, but I'm glad we did." "Emma," Alexander said softly, still rocking Grace, "I need to thank you." "For what?" "For saving me," he said. "I was lost before you came into my life. I had built this empire of money and power, but inside I was empty. I thought that was all I deserved, all I was capable of. But you saw something in me worth saving. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. You gave me back my humanity. You saved me too," Emma reminded him. "I was drowning in debt and despair, watching my mother die and feeling powerless. You gave me hope. You gave me a chance. I guess we saved each other then," Alexander said with a smile. Grace made a small sound in her sleep, and both parents held their breath until she settled again. In that quiet moment, Emma reflected on how much had changed in just over a year. She had gone from sleeping on a friend's couch, buried under impossible debt, to this, sitting in a beautiful nursery with a man she loved beyond measure and a daughter who represented all the possibilities of the future. "What are you thinking about?" Alexander asked. "I'm thinking about that day in the diner," Emma said, "when Robert sat down across from me with his impossible offer. Thought it was the strangest, most suspicious thing that had ever happened to me." "It was strange," Alexander admitted. "Looking back, I can't believe you agreed to it." "Desperation makes you brave," Emma said. Or maybe just reckless. I'm still not sure which. Does it matter? Alexander asked. It brought you to me. No, Emma smiled. I guess it doesn't matter at all. Marcus became a regular presence in their lives. The $5 million had allowed him to restart his life, put his sister through college, and begin building his own company. The relationship between him and Alexander was still complicated, still healing, but they were trying. Some wounds took time. On Grace's first birthday, Marcus brought his sister Jennifer, a bright young woman studying engineering. As Emma watched Alexander and Marcus talking, not quite at ease but getting closer, she felt proud of how far they had both come. "Thank you for pushing him to reach out," Marcus said to Emma later in the kitchen. "I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive him, but I'm starting to understand him better. And seeing him with you, with Grace, I can see he's changed." "People can change," Emma said, "if they want it badly enough, and if someone believes they can." "You believed in him," Marcus observed. "I did. I do," Emma corrected. "Every day." "He's lucky to have you," Marcus said. "I think you might be the best thing that ever happened to him." "I think we're the best thing that ever happened to each other," Emma said, watching through the window as Alexander lifted Grace onto his shoulders, making her giggle with delight. That night, after Grace was asleep and the guests had gone home, Alexander and Emma sat on the terrace overlooking the city. The lights sparkled below like earthbound stars. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" Emma asked. "If I had said no that day in the car, if I had walked away." "All the time," Alexander admitted. "It terrifies me, actually. How close I came to never knowing you. How I almost let pride and fear keep me alone forever." "But you didn't," Emma pointed out. "You took a risk. You reached out. You let someone in." "Because I was desperate too," Alexander said. "Maybe not financially, but emotionally, spiritually. I was dying inside, Emma. I had everything money could buy, and nothing that actually mattered. I needed saving as much as you did. So we were two desperate people who found each other," Emma said. "And built something real," Alexander added. "Something lasting." Emma leaned her head on his shoulder. "Do you think it would have worked if it had started normally? If we had just met at a party or through friends?" Alexander considered this. "I don't know. I think maybe we needed the strangeness of our beginning. We needed the contract and the time limit and the clear boundaries. It forced us to be honest in ways we might not have been otherwise. When you have 6 months and everything is defined by rules, there's a kind of safety that lets you be vulnerable. And then we fell in love anyway, despite all the rules designed to prevent exactly that," Emma said. "Or maybe because of them," Alexander suggested. "Maybe the rules gave us space to really see each other, without all the usual games people play when dating." Emma smiled. "So you're saying our fake marriage was the perfect foundation for a real one?" "I'm saying that sometimes the strangest paths lead to the best destinations," Alexander said, kissing the top of her head. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the city lights and listening to the distant sounds of traffic and life happening below them. Emma thought about her mother, healthy now and besotted with her granddaughter. She thought about Sarah, who had stood beside her through everything and had recently met someone special herself. She thought about the woman she had been just over a year ago, broken and scared and out of auctions. That woman felt like a stranger now. Emma had been transformed not by money or luxury, but love and purpose and the discovery that she was stronger than she ever knew. The debt had been the catalyst, but the transformation had been internal. "I want to do something," Emma said suddenly. "What's that?" Alexander asked. "I want to start a foundation for people in situations like I was in, caring for sick family members and drowning in medical debt. I want to help them the way you helped me." Alexander sat up straighter. "That's a wonderful idea. We could fund it through the company, make it a major initiative." "No," Emma said. "I want to do this myself. I have skills, experience, passion. I spent years as a graphic designer before everything fell apart. I can build this, run it, make it something real. I don't want to just be your wife or Grace's mother. I want to be someone who makes a difference." Alexander looked at her with such pride and love that it made Emma's chest ache. "You're absolutely right. Tell me what you need, and I'll support you however I can." "But this is your vision, your foundation." "Thank you," Emma said, "for understanding that I need this. Thank you for reminding me that wealth is only meaningful when it's used to help others," Alexander replied. Over the next year, Emma built her foundation from the ground up. She called it Second Chances, and it provided financial assistance and resources to families dealing with catastrophic medical expenses. She worked tirelessly, finding donors, setting up systems, helping people one by one. Alexander supported her fully, offering business advice when asked, but never taking over. He watched his wife bloom into this new role with pride. She was on the board, managing staff, speaking at fundraisers, and making a real difference in people's lives. On the foundation's first anniversary, they had helped 43 families avoid bankruptcy and supported ongoing care for patients. Emma stood at the podium during their celebration event and told her story, leaving out some of the more unusual details, but being honest about her desperation and how someone's unexpected generosity had changed her life. "I was where many of you are now," she said to the families they had helped. "I felt hopeless and alone. I thought I was out of options. But I learned something important. We're never as alone as we think we are. There are people who care, who want to help, who understand that illness doesn't discriminate, and that good people shouldn't lose everything because they got sick or someone they love got sick." After the event, a young woman approached Emma with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she said simply. "My mother is alive because of you. We would have had to stop her treatment without second chances. You saved her life." Emma hugged her tightly. "You saved her life by not giving up, by fighting for her. We just helped remove one obstacle." Later, in the car going home, Emma was quiet. Alexander reached over and took her hand. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm better than okay," Emma said. "I feel like my life finally makes sense. Like all the pain and struggle led me exactly where I was supposed to be." "To me," Alexander said. "To purpose," Emma corrected gently. "To you, yes, but also to understanding that suffering can be transformed into service, that our worst moments can become the foundation for our greatest contributions." "When did you get so wise?" Alexander teased. "I married a man who taught me that it's never too late to choose differently, to be better, to matter," Emma said. "No," Alexander said seriously. "You taught me that. I was just lucky enough to listen." Grace grew into a bright, curious toddler who had both parents wrapped around her tiny finger. She looked at the world with wonder and asked endless questions that Alexander answered with infinite patience. Watching them together, Emma sometimes marveled at how this man, who had once thought himself incapable of real love, was the most devoted father she had ever seen. One evening, when Grace was 3, she asked Emma, "Mommy, how did you and Daddy fall in love?" Emma glanced at Alexander, who was smiling with interest. "Well, sweetheart, that's a complicated story." "Tell me," Grace insisted with the determination of a 3-year-old who wouldn't be denied. Emma thought about how to make it age-appropriate and settled on a version of the truth. "Daddy needed help with something important, and I needed help too. So we helped each other. And while we were helping each other, we discovered that we liked being together. And then we realized we loved being together. And then we realized we loved each other." "Did you get married?" Grace asked. "We did," Alexander said, pulling Grace onto his lap. "Twice, actually." "Twice?" Grace giggled. "Why twice?" "The first time was practice," Alexander said, winking at Emma. "The second time was for real." "That's silly, Daddy," Grace declared. "Maybe," Alexander agreed, "but sometimes the best things in life are a little silly." After Grace went to bed, Emma found Alexander in his study, looking at something on his computer. She came up behind him and wrapped her arms around his shoulders, looking at the screen. It showed a photo from their courthouse wedding, both of them stiff and awkward, barely touching. "Why are you looking at that?" Emma asked. "Remembering where we started," Alexander said.
Look at us. We look like strangers. We were strangers, Emma pointed out. Strangers who became everything to each other, Alexander said. Sometimes I look at this photo and can't believe it's us. Can't believe that those two people who had no idea what they were getting into would end up here, with Grace, with the foundation, with this life we've built. Do you regret any of it? Emma asked. Not for a second, Alexander said firmly. Every unconventional step led us here. I'd do it all again exactly the same way if I knew it meant ending up with you. Even the part where I called you manipulative? Emma teased. Especially that part, Alexander laughed. That was when I knew you were special. Most people are too intimidated by wealth, to be honest. You saw through all of it from day one. I was too desperate to be intimidated, Emma reminded him. You were too authentic to pretend, Alexander corrected. That's what I fell in love with first. Your inability to be anything other than exactly who you are. Emma came around the desk and sat on his lap, the way she had done countless times before. I love you, Alexander Holt. My fake husband who became my real husband, who became the love of my life. I love you, Emma Holt, my desperate stranger who became my wife, who became my everything, Alexander replied, kissing her softly. 5 years after that first meeting in the diner, Emma and Alexander sat on the same terrace where they had spent so many evenings. But this time, they weren't alone. Grace was there, along with her baby brother James, who had been born a year earlier. Emma's mother was there too, 5 years cancer-free and looking healthier than she had in a decade. Sarah and her wife Lisa had joined them, along with Marcus and Jennifer and a handful of other close friends who had become family. They were celebrating Second Chance's 5th anniversary. The foundation had grown beyond Emma's wildest dreams, helping thousands of families and inspiring similar organizations in other cities. Emma had been interviewed by major news outlets, invited to speak at conferences, recognized as a leader in healthcare advocacy. As Emma looked around at all these people she loved, at the life she had built from the ashes of desperation, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. She caught Alexander's eye across the terrace, and he smiled at her with such warmth and pride that she felt tears prick her eyes. Later, after everyone had gone home and the children were asleep, Alexander found Emma in Grace's room, watching their daughter sleep. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly, slipping his arm around her waist. "I'm thinking about how that day in the diner, I thought my life was over," Emma said quietly. "I thought I had run out of options, that there was no way forward. I felt so alone and so hopeless. And then a stranger sat down across from me with an insane offer, and everything changed. I think about that too," Alexander admitted. "I think about how close I came to never meeting you. If the business deal had fallen through a month earlier, if I had chosen a different approach, if Robert had found someone else. So many tiny choices that led to us." "Do you believe in fate?" Emma asked. "I believe in choices," Alexander said. "I believe that we make thousands of tiny choices every day, and some of them, the important ones, have the power to completely change our lives. I chose to offer you that arrangement. You chose to accept. Those choices led to more choices, and here we are." "Here we are," Emma echoed. "Happy, whole, and so far from where we started." "Not so far," Alexander disagreed gently. "We're exactly where we were always meant to be. We just had to take a strange and winding path to get here." Emma turned in his arms to face him. "If you could go back and tell yourself something on that day you first saw me in the diner, what would you say?" Alexander thought about this seriously. "I'd tell myself that the woman sitting across from me, with fear in her eyes and bills on the table, was going to save my life. That I should stop thinking of it as a business arrangement and start thinking of it as the beginning of everything. That falling in love with her wouldn't be a complication, but the whole point." "And what would you tell yourself?" Alexander asked. "I'd tell myself that the man in the expensive suit isn't the enemy or a threat or too good to be true. I'd tell myself to trust him, to be brave, to let myself fall," Emma said, "because he's going to catch me. And together, we're going to build something beautiful." They stood there in their daughter's room, holding each other in the dim glow of the nightlight. Two people who had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and built a love that was real and deep and lasting. The contract that had brought them together was long since destroyed. The 6-month arrangement had become a lifetime commitment. The fake marriage had transformed into the truest thing in any of their lives. And Emma Richardson, who had once been so desperate that she agreed to be a fake wife, had discovered that sometimes the most unconventional beginnings lead to the most extraordinary love stories. That sometimes a business arrangement can become a romance. That sometimes the person who saves you is the person who needs saving just as much. That sometimes, in the depths of desperation, when you have nothing left to lose, you find everything you never knew you needed. And, as Alexander,
He held his wife and looked at his sleeping daughter and thought about the son in the next room and the life they had built together. He knew that Robert had been right that first day. Emma Richardson had been exactly the right choice. Not because she fit some profile or psychological assessment, but because she was real and honest and brave enough to take a chance on a complicated man with a dark past and an uncertain heart. She had seen past his money and his walls and his carefully constructed persona to the lonely, lost person underneath. And she had loved him anyway, not despite his flaws and mistakes, but with full knowledge of them. She had given him something he had never thought he deserved, a second chance, a real chance at happiness and love and family. And in return, he had given her security and support and partnership. But more than that, he had seen her strength and capability and encouraged her to use it. He had supported her dreams and watched with pride as she built something meaningful and important. They had saved each other in all the ways that mattered, and they would spend the rest of their lives being grateful for that desperate day in a downtown diner when a broken billionaire and a desperate woman made a deal that changed everything.